Welcome, everyone, to Black Men Excel. I'm your host and moderator for today. My name is Mark Jones from ESPN. I've been a broadcaster, play-by-play announcer for ESPN for 30 years on the NBA and college basketball, as well as college football, as well as a host of other events. Our panelists for today include Stu Jackson, the Associate Commissioner of the Big East Conference for basketball. Stu has also been in the front office with the Vancouver Grizzlies in the NBA, a member of the front office of the NBA and Turner Sports as well prior to his current position. And Erik Moses is with us today as our other panelist, the president of the Nashville Super Speedway, the first Black man to hold that esteemed title, the first Black man to be a leader in that aspect in any NASCAR track. Today we're going to be talking about front office power. And guys, when you look at the numbers in sports, the 80% of players in the NBA that are Black, you only have 5 Black head coaches and just 1 president of basketball. In the NFL, you've got 70% Black participation on the field in terms of athletes and only 3 head coaches. The WNBA, 69% African-American and Black, and very few representatives in the front office as well as on the bench as head coaches. And it goes on and on in the litany of shortcomings, I guess, in how there should be and can be more representation of Black folks in front offices. Stu, let's start with you and tell me first a little bit about your ascension to where you have been in your sporting career. And what's been the prevailing theme in being able to execute what has worked for you?
No, thank you very much, Mark, and it's a pleasure being here with you. In terms of my own career, it's been very storied in that I've held positions in the sports industry, specifically basketball, at a variety of different levels. I've been a player, I've coached, I've been an administrator, an executive, and some might think that well, I really can't hold a job. But the real theme is that I've had a very diverse set of experiences, and I think just along the way, each set of those experiences and stops along the way have prepared me in a different way for my next step. And I've always operated under the notion that I wanted to remain nimble. I wanted to continue to grow and to learn. Being in the game of basketball, whether you're a coach or a player, administrator, or executive, the great thing that I feel blessed to have been a part of is that every single day, there's a new issue, a new problem, and things are never the same. So that has fueled me. Aside from just continuing to grow in this profession.
Erik, I want to ask you the same question. When I first saw and heard that you were going to be on the panel, I was really excited and curious, Erik, about the fact that in NASCAR, when you talk about Nashville Super Speedway, prior to that, you were with the XFL, with the DC Defenders. NASCAR, though, is traditionally a sport that hasn't involved a significant part of African-American culture. What's your story and what prepared you for that?
Yeah, so one, thanks for having me, and it's great to be on a panel with Stu, whose career I've been following for a long time, with frankly gaining some inspiration from people like him who have come before and kind of blazed trails for folks like myself. I'm a lawyer by training and someone who made his way over to the business side and to the sports side because there was a need in the District of Columbia. I served as a sports commissioner for that city for almost 11 years. And to Stu's point, kind of was doing things all along the various stops of my career to train myself, to gain more skills, to gain more insight and knowledge about all manner of businesses. People get kind of caught up in thinking of sports businesses like there's some kind of, there's some secret sauce to them. They're businesses at the end of the day. You have to make more money than you spend. If you understand that, I think you can be successful, provided you have an entree. And the entree usually is the most difficult thing for us. And I think NASCAR is no exception to that. The notion that I could be the first Black person to be a track president at NASCAR in 2020 is a bit astonishing. As I've said before, I'm not naive enough to believe I'm the first person of color who's qualified enough to hold that position, but I'm happy that the training, the stops along the way, and the things that I've done, including running a pro football team and being a venue management executive and someone who has curated events, put events together, run buildings, renovated buildings, all of that kind of collectively prepared me for this opportunity. And I think it was clear once the folks at Dover Motorsports, who I work for, and NASCAR saw my background and my experience, that it made sense and it's a good fit. But finding those entrees, I think, has been the thing that has been difficult for us because, as you know, Mark, I mean, sports is a somewhat incestuous industry.
Very much so.
It's very much about who you know and who you've worked with and who's going to go to bat for you. And the more of us that have these positions, can occupy these positions, and can follow in Stu's footsteps and people like him, hopefully we'll be turning back and sharing that knowledge, that insight, and providing some of those on-reps for people who are going to follow us.
Yeah, and I think about, guys, the significance and really the need, especially in today's climate, to be able to look across a production room, a boardroom, and see somebody that looks like you. If you're a participant, whether it be, you know, a driver in NASCAR or whether it be a player in the NBA or college basketball, college football, we've seen in the NBA recently, Doc Rivers express his players' feelings on what's happening in America and how Black folks continue to love this country despite the lack of reciprocity sometimes. How would you guys characterize the need for, as we're talking about here today, front office power as it relates vis-a-vis to Black folks?
You bring up a very good point, but, my view is particularly, over the last 6 months or so, Mark, there's been a real emancipation, for lack of a better term, of, Black athletes, administrators, and executives, I think, across all sports, including motorsport. And that is, I can tell you just from the history, a very positive sign. I'm someone that grew up as a teenager through the civil rights movement in the 60s. And at that time, simply put, the voices that were prevalent then were only Black voices, or primarily Black voices. And we cried out for help. We cried out for education. We cried out for equality and social justice. What's different today is, the masses have jumped on the train, and I think in a way have emancipated us as, Black people, Black men in sports, to really have a voice, and not only have a voice, but feel comfortable having a voice in a way that we never have historically. And, as being a part of the NBA family, I couldn't be prouder. I couldn't be prouder of Doc Rivers. I couldn't be prouder of, the players like Jaylen Brown and Karl Anthony Towns and, Malcolm Brogdon, from Milwaukee, just participating, having a voice, and being very comfortable in their own skin. And I think that's what's really different today than it has been over the past decade. And I think the best is yet to come.
I love the forum that we have with Black Men Excel because it is a solutions-based conversation in the ascension of Black people in front office power in sports. And, Erik, what would you say in terms of getting into the pipeline? You had mentioned earlier the fact that sports can be very cliquish, very country clubbish. What does it take in terms of, experience, amassing the necessary relationships that are so important? How would you tell somebody to go about that? How would you advise them?
Well, I mean, I think we have to all be about seeking excellence in whatever it is, it's our chosen vocation. I mean, I started off as an attorney, and a broadcast attorney, buying and selling TV and radio stations back in the 90s, and was really focused on being good at what I did. I'm not someone who has the traditional route to sports, who, you know, started selling tickets and then moved to sponsorship and worked their way up. That wasn't my route. What I wanted to focus on was being the best attorney I could be, and then being the best business person I could be, and making the necessary connections and networks and reputation for yourself where people associate you with excellence. And once that association is there, then it's about seeking out the opportunities, understanding where to find those, understanding who you can talk to avail yourself of the information about those opportunities, and then putting yourself in a position where you can compete for those opportunities. And that's essentially what happened with me.
Yeah, I think about, you know, like the business I'm in, guys, broadcasting. I started as an editorial assistant making $35 a day. I would have done it for free, watching NBA games, watching baseball games, watching any kind of sporting events, logging those events and writing up scripts for the local sportscast that night as a paid intern. Stu, what do you think about being able to get into the pipeline, working at an entry level, and then being able to work your way up the ladder, so to speak? Sometimes there's important things. Sometimes there's a monetary decision to be made. Sometimes there's a career decision to be made. And that's often a tough one too.
Yeah, no, again, a fair question. And I echo a little bit what Erik referred to, and I'll use it with an example, is that you have to, being in the sports business and in this industry, as a young and up and coming, you know, professional, be willing to do almost anything in this industry. You know, it's very difficult to plan to be a NBA general manager. It's very difficult to plan to be a college executive. You've got to start somewhere. And I use the example when I began at the NBA. You know, there was such a demand to be a part of the league and be a part of the initiative. We had Harvard graduates, Ivy League graduates, answering fan mail. And, you know, and I only cite that example because that's really what it takes, is that you have to get on the bus in some level in this industry, get on that bus, and then figure it out somewhat as you go along. Because to try to predetermine your path, I think you're barking up the wrong tree because it's too competitive. And to Erik's point, whatever it is you do, be the best fan mail writer that you can. Look for other opportunities, either within your organization or opportunities after 6 o'clock at night that are sports related that you can become proficient in. You know, I interned a young man at the Big East Conference several years ago. You know, he wanted to be an athletic director someday. Sure enough, you know, he leaves his internship. He ends up getting a position at Texas A&M, which is great. You know, he's on his way. But he was a person of great initiative. Aside from his position at Texas A&M, he took the initiative to start his own business on the side.
Wow.
Using collegiate emojis. You know? So now all of a sudden, he's not only a budding, you know, administrator at Texas A&M, but now he has some business experience, and that makes you valuable. Just be a sponge and grab everything that you can. You know, today, not to go on, I'll give you one more example, but in basketball, analytics is the order of the day.
Sure.
Okay, it's an analytic-driven sport. But as I talk to young analysts in the sport of basketball, I say, well, what type of practical coaching experiences are you getting to make yourself a better communicator about what it is you're analyzing, so that you can talk to coaches and general managers? Is there a basketball clinic you can go to? I'm not saying you need to be a coach, but what are you doing to make yourself more proficient in talking the language to people that you're going to be communicating with? And so I use both those examples to just diversify yourself.
Sure. It could be good at a lot of different things. Obviously, an important need to be that way. And you talk about, Stu, mentoring a young man who later went on to be successful at Texas A&M in the athletic department. Erik, I asked you, there's usually that one tipping point in a career or a path where you meet somebody, a mentor, somebody that gives you a pivotal piece of advice or takes you under their wing. What was your experience in your corporate path and getting to where you are now?
I mean, I wish I could narrow it down to one. I mean, I've been blessed and having.
Are there a few people?
Yeah, you know, there was a junior partner at my law firm when I first started my professional career who taught me about being accountable for every part of a process that you're involved in. You know, never betting on someone else to ensure that the work that you're responsible for turning in and having done the right way is going to be done. I'll spare you the long story, but it was a painful one as a baby lawyer to learn that you were the reason why a deal wasn't going to get done for a client, because I was waiting for someone else to do their part of it. Right. And I remember having a very spirited conversation with him where he said, you know, this is your deal and you're responsible for every part of it, whether you're doing it yourself or delegating it. And so it's your job to ensure that everything's ready to go at the designated time for our client, no matter what. And that was a lesson I kind of never forgot. I've been fortunate to have, you know, mentors are good. I think oftentimes what we're looking for are older mentors, more seasoned mentors. I've been very blessed to have friends, colleagues, and peers who have, you know, provided lots of insight and lots of opportunity and connections and introductions. And I think we in particular as a people need to do, and as Black men in particular, need to do a much better job of extending ourselves to each other in that way. I have a saying that I like to judge my friends by whether or not they think of me when I'm not in the room. And that's what we need to start doing for each other. In my very humble opinion, is thinking about, oh, okay, I was in a meeting the other day and they're looking for some on-air talent. Wow, I should call Mark and let him know that this might be something he's interested in, because that's the way that we're going to make up the ground that we trail in terms of many of these industries, is by collectively trying to push forward and seeing my success and your success and Stu's success and everyone else's. We have to start looking at it that way if we're going to make some real headway.
That's a great point, because so much of advancement, as we mentioned earlier, we alluded to the fact that it can be somewhat political, relationship driven. I recently spoke to a group of NBA and college coaches about how to climb the ladder in the business. And sometimes, you guys both know that the media plays a very prominent role sometimes in getting certain names out there to create a certain narrative. And my point to them was, hey, if you're really thinking about becoming a head coach, when you see me at an NBA game or a college football game, if you want to be a college football head coach, I've got no problem making conversation with you. Let's talk. And because I think when, as you pointed out, Erik, sometimes we don't think of each other that way, and being able to build those relationships and create a narrative where I can say, hey, Lloyd Pierce, a fantastic assistant coach, he deserves a head coaching job. If I can say those things on air, then that certainly helps create a little bit of energy in terms of advancement. Stu, what are your thoughts on something along those lines in the upper reaches of management in collegiate sports as it pertains to you?
Well, I feel very strongly, Mark, and you both bring up very good points. But at the top of this panel, you were talking about statistics. Let's just take the NBA and we'll turn to college, about the percentage of players involved in the NBA. It's upwards to 83, 84%. And you've got 45% of the NBA that have assistant coaches, on their rosters. And, head coaches, it's almost 30%. But the number that really fails us is in the NBA, there are only 11% of people of color in ownership positions.
Right.
And listen, I mean, as Black people in this regard, we're no different than our white counterparts or other people of color. We feel more comfortable with people that look like us, talk like us, relate like we do. So to the end that we can increase the number of ownership representation in the NBA, or athletic directors at the collegiate level,
Sure.
which pales in comparison, I think you'll see advancement that way as well. Not in a, necessarily strategic pointed, way, just because you're a person of color, but it just stands to reason that people today, as we found, as I'm sure Erik has found, people feel more comfortable with people that look like them in the room. And I think that will lead to more advancement.
Yeah, I think about, guys, what really needs to change in terms of corporate culture so that Black folks can be looked upon as that person that deserves the promotion, because sometimes it's not always the best person that gets that promotion or gets that advancement. What needs to change about corporate culture to reflect the culture that they have in any particular sport? Erica, what would you say to that in terms of corporate America and creating a different mindset where we are looked upon as being ready for the job? I think about my experience, guys. I was hired in 1990 by ESPN, and Dennis Swanson, he made up his mind. He finally said, hey, listen, he went into a meeting one day, a production meeting. He said, we don't have enough people that look like the people we're covering. And he said, we are going to go out and hire a qualified Black announcer. And that's when I got a call from ESPN and ABC. And 2 months later, I had the job. Is it a matter simply, guys, and I'll throw it out to both of you, actually, start with you, Erik. Is it a matter simply of corporate America trying to do the right thing? What do you think?
Look, I think representation matters, right? If you think about what it meant to so many millions of people to see Barack Obama be elected president twice of this country, and people like myself thinking you would never see something like that in our lifetime, and the inspiration that was drawn from seeing him and seeing a country that often, as you said at the top of the panel, feels like it doesn't love us the way we love it. Seeing the country come together to do something monumental and historic like that is inspiring. I think, seeing Stu in his positions was inspiring. I've gotten very nice letters and notes and emails from people saying, seeing me in this position is inspiring to them. Representation matters. And I think corporate America has to be open to understanding that matters and being able to recognize that I may not be from NASCAR, but that doesn't mean I can't understand the business. That doesn't mean that I won't bring a fresh perspective to things that will allow them to look at the business slightly differently, and maybe in ways that ultimately help them do what all leagues are trying to do, which is expand the fan base, create more fans, make more money. I've been so proud to, join the NASCAR extended family, given the leadership that this organization has shown over the last year or so, whether it's banning the Confederate flag from tracks, or the way they came together, drivers, owners, and the sanctioning body to support Bubba Wallace at Talladega, and the Black Lives Matter kind of movement and his statement about that. Those kinds of things, while many people can shrug them off and say, well, that's small, and well, they should have banned the flag years and years ago. Be that as it may, the fact that the organization was willing to come forward and do that in an affirmative manner, I think says to people like me and others, and Michael Jordan, who's just bought a team, and other folks like that, oh, we may be welcome in this sport. Oh, this may not be what I thought it was, and let me give this a second chance. And that opening, gives you an opportunity to change hearts and minds, I think.
Yeah. Hey, Stu, how do you think we make, further to what Erik just said, how do we make corporate culture, how do we illuminate and enlighten corporate culture to make them see that being inclusive can mean being more profitable too?
No, it's a fair question. In corporate, my experience in corporate sort of sports America is probably not unlike, the experience that many young black men period experience in their respective organizations. I do think part of the ability to advance and to feel inclusive falls somewhat on the education and the mindset of white America. In other words, I think it's really natural. If you look at in this country, in organizations, I think it's really natural for white fragility to flourish. It's very easy to dismiss, a black candidate. It's very easy to dismiss a black voice in the boardroom. It's very easy to just dismiss a person of color generally because you don't have to deal with it. But I think, in situations where you have corporate executives that have been educated, over the course of their lifetime, listen, you sense that as a black man when you are being, considered an equal or your voice is being heard, you get that sense. And I think those are the type of mentors from white men specifically, that you have a chance, and I think the culture will change, or the culture is different than it is in most places. I'm a big believer that, you can have mentors, and I love Erik's, thought about just sort of, looking for mentors sideways. It reminds me of something that I read about Issa Rae, because that was really her strategy in sort of building her brand. But in those occasions when you have to, or take advantage of mentoring up, and those mentors are white, I think it's really key that they be educated, sort of cultured white men that understand at some level the plight of Black Americans, and which builds an acceptance in their own mind to get rid of that white fragility, to be embracing of Black faces. And I also think that's important. And I've been really fortunate to be around people like that. When you talk about some of the smart, some very smart men like Rick Pitino and David Stern and Russ Kalanick, former deputy commissioner at the NBA. I mean, these people, they're woke and they get it, and their organizations reflect that.
Yeah, we got a couple of minutes left. Just wanted to get a couple of final thoughts before we wrap it up. But it feels like in our country right now, there's as you talked about a moment ago, Stu, there's a certain newness. We've peeled back the onion a little bit on race with the Minneapolis police killing of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and some of the other social injustices that we've seen, and we've struck a raw chord. So this part of that feels like this is a time that potentially could be a time of progress. And Erik, let me start with you. What would you say to somebody who is in their mid-20s, fresh out of college, or maybe even older, who's looking to take that next step in their corporate career and hit that home run in the current climate that we're in right now, considering some of the variables that we've talked about?
Look, I think we have more opportunity now than any other time in our history. There is an openness to considering people of color, women and others for prime positions in corporations and organizations of all kinds now, that I think wasn't there just 2 years ago, certainly not 5, 10, and 50 years ago. And I think we have to be knowledgeable about that, and we have to be open to finding common ground with people who don't look like us and don't come from where we come from. And that's something that all of us could use. I mean, sometimes it doesn't even take a person who's not from our background being woke necessarily. It takes them being able to like you, and if they like you, then they trust you, and if they trust you, they'll do business with you. And a lot of that happens, and this is the power of sport. The power of sports is that sports has been that language for so long that allows us to find common ground with people who we don't otherwise know and don't otherwise share a lot of same characteristics with, because we're sitting in a stadium rooting for the same team, and that gives us that bond. And that's what's so powerful about what we do and why people are fans, right? Nobody, Microsoft is a much more consequential company in the grand scheme of things than, say, the Dallas Cowboys. But I bet you the Dallas Cowboys have launched many more friendships than Microsoft has, because because of that common language. And so I think we have to be open to seeing that, to using that, and to reaching out to people, as Stu said, sideways, up and down, in order to make those kinds of bonds that will allow us to secure certain opportunities.
Yeah, Stu, same thing for you. Brand new climate here in this country. I've always said that if the world were, if this country were one big locker room, then we'd all be better off. There'd be fewer barriers to entry for Black folks. How do we make that locker room bigger, Stu, and make that advancement?
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, I'm going to go back to something that actually Erik alluded to at the beginning of our talk, in that, and I do agree with him, I think the opportunities available now are more prevalent than they've ever been. But, you know, to young men and women out there looking to enter this profession, I would refer to something else Erik said, in that your competency is paramount. Mm-hmm. Paramount. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily need to be the most educated person on your team. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have the best experience on your team. What it does mean is that you have to have a drive, a willingness to work, and even a greater willingness to learn what you don't know. And if you stick to those ideals, your growth will take care of itself. But I can't overemphasize the need for all of us, you know, as Black people, to just focus in on what you need to do to make yourself the most learned and competent, whatever it is, position that you're in, and things will take care of themselves.
That's awesome. Some sage and cogent advice from a couple of guys that have done it and continue to. Stu Jackson, thanks a lot for joining us. Erik Moses, thank you very much, guys. It has been my pleasure to be the moderator and host on this event, Black Men Excel. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
Thank you.